the wheel, use a 22mm socket, take the lug nuts off. Pull the wheel off. Use a 36mm socket, take this axle nut off. And you can take a punch just in the center of the axle and just give it a tap with a hammer. Make sure you can loosen it up. That's pretty loose, that's good. You don't want to hit it with the hammer too hard or you're going to mushroom the end of it. We're going to have to remove this ball joint nut right here to separate the knuckle from the lower control arm. If you have a ball joint that's been replaced and you have bolts right here, it'll be easier to take those 3 bolts out. This lower control arm has rivets connected to the lower ball joint, so for us it's going to be easier to take the nut off. Take the cotter pin off. You can use some side cutters. Just bend it out of the way. Or use a hook, cotter pin tool, or even some needle nose pliers. And pull the cotter pin out. Use an 18mm wrench and loosen up the nut. You can try to take the nut off. If you can't get it off because the CV axle is in the way, we're going to have to separate the ball joint first. There we go. And take the nut off. You can pry this down and just slide it out of the knuckle. And luckily, looking at the boot, looks like I didn't rip it. But just be aware of that. And gently, just give it a couple taps while you're pushing it out. And just slide this out. There is a spacer on here. Take that off. Keep that. You're going to put that back on when you put it back together. Now we have to separate the axle from the transmission. I'm just going to use a fork like this. Slide it in here. And you might want to put a drain bucket just in case any transmission fluid comes out. And then just give it some taps. And there we go. It's separated. Oh, there's some fluid coming. And slide it out. When you're doing this job, it's a good idea to replace this axle seal. You want to pry it out, get the new axle seal, put the new one in, and hammer it in with the correct installation tool. Take the axle and slide it in the same way it came out. Get it past the seal. And you want it to lock in place. If you're struggling, you can just take a dead blow hammer or rubber mallet. Just give it a tap till it bottoms out. It should be good. You can grab it and pull it. If it doesn't come out, then it should be locked in properly. Now before we slide this on, remember you want that spacer. It's going to go right there. And slide it into the wheel hub. Now pry the lower control arm down, get that ball joint lined up. All right, and before that lower ball joint goes all the way up, we're going to put that nut on. Get the nut started. And you can push the axle all the way in. Tighten up the ball joint nut. hard to get a torque wrench in here, but if you can, you want to torque that nut to 89 inch-pounds and then an additional 165 degrees. Do the best you can. And then you want to make sure the hole is lined up for the cotter pin. If it's not lined up, just tighten it up a little bit more until it is lined up. Take the cotter pin, a new cotter pin, slide it in, and take some side cutters and just bend the cotter pin. You want to fold it over. And just trim the excess. Put the spindle nut on. This is the 11mm plug that you have to remove. When the engine is hot and the vehicle is level, remove that plug and transmission fluid should just stream out of it. If you have a nice small stream, then put the plug back in and you're all set. You want to take a look at the transmission fluid that came out. You can measure it and put the same amount back in if you would like, or start with a quart or half a quart and check it. On top of the transmission, there's this cap right here. This is the filler. You take this cap off and get a long skinny funnel, and that's where you can add the fluid. Put the wheel on. Put the lug nuts on. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Just go around again, double check.